Recording. All right, awesome. So listen, today we're looking at this handout. This handout is called Nationalism and the Rise of Italy, Germany, and Japan. Exactly. So what we're going to talk about this day, super important idea, super important concept. We've talked about it before, but we're going to talk about it again right now. It's the concept of nationalism. And what we're going to do on our handout, we're going to write down in the very first line, the most influential idea of the 19th century was nationalism. So you'll write that down on the first line. You won't just look surprised and shocked. Nationalism. Now, we've talked about nationalism before. That's like a sense of like pride in your people, pride in your culture, pride in your identity. And we're going to see that nationalism is going to change Europe forever. On the second line on your handout, it says this idea of nationalism, it stresses people's membership in a nation with a defined, and we're going to write down three things: culture, history, and territory. It says on the handout that nationalism stresses people's membership in a nation with a defined culture, history, and territory. Write down those three words: culture, history, and territory. So that's cool. And in fact, we're going to see some actual impacts of what nationalism does. It says on the handout that this unified Western Europe, but it also helped tear apart the Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian empires. Let me show you four examples. I'm going to show you two examples of nationalism bringing people together, and I'll give you two examples of nationalism tearing people apart. If you look at the handout, or rather, if you look at the map on the screen, this map on the screen, everything in color on the map on the screen are parts of Europe that speak German. If you look, every color is like a country. Is there one country that speaks German? No, there's actually a lot of small countries that speak German. There was a country that doesn't exist anymore called Prussia. There was a part of the country that doesn't exist anymore called Bavaria. So it turns out that there's this idea called nationalism that says all people to speak German, I think we should probably just get together and have one country called Germany. Like, wouldn't that be better to have one country than having like 5 small countries that speak German? I mean, how many countries are there that, would choose to be fragmented instead of being closer together? There's another example. This is modern day, no surprise here, what country? Italy. And listen, every color represents a country. Is there one Italian-speaking country? No. There's a country that doesn't exist anymore called the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. That was a thing. There was a country called the Kingdom of Sardinia.
Sardines?
Of Sardinia. There is a country on this map called the Papal States. So they all speak Italian, and they say, what would be better than having like a bunch of small countries speak Italian?
Italy.
Why don't we just all come together? And what should we call a country where we all speak Italian? Let's go with Italy. Good, I like it. Let's run with that. So this is two examples of how nationalism brings people together. But let me show you another picture. This is a picture of an empire that you probably never heard of, called the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And again, every color represents an ethnic group, a different ethnic group. And what this means, if you look at it, there's actually two really big ethnic groups. In pink, there are those who are Austrian, and in green, there are people that are Hungarian, which is why this empire is called the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But listen, if you take a look at this map on the screen, there's a lot of colors on this map. There are Germans, there are Hungarians, there's Czechs, there's Slovaks, there's Poles, there's Ukrainians, there's Slovenes, there's Croats, there's Serbs, there's Romanians, and there's Italians. Now listen, if every color on this map gets really proud of their ethnic identity, if every color on this map gets really into nationalism, what's going to happen to this one empire? It's going to break up because everyone's going to want to do their own thing. In the same way that nationalism brought Germany and Italy together, nationalism threatens to tear an empire like this apart. Take a look at another empire. What modern day country is this? That's Russia. Now, when we think of Russia, we think of like white people, like the dictator of Russia today is Vladimir Putin. Everywhere in red are where these white Vladimir Putin Russians live. But that's not all of Russia. In fact, there's a lot of countries, a lot of colors here. There are, in the blue, these are Turks. These are people who come from like Central Asia. They're mainly Muslim. And yellow, you have these people that are related to our Native American, these darker skinned people. There's all these different ethnic groups. You know what? If every group on this map gets really into their ethnic identity and gets really proud of their ethnic background, they could divide. So it turns out nationalism can either bring people together or nationalism can tear people apart. It says on the handout that, as we mentioned, this unified Western Europe, but also helped to tear apart the Ottoman and the Austro-Hungarian empires. So let's look at language and national identity in Europe before 1871. We're going to write down a common language helped create a sense of unity. A common language helped create a sense of unity. Because listen, if every one of us speaks German on this map, let's get together and have a country called Germany. If every one of us speaks Italian on this map, let's get together and let's make a country called Italy. It says on the handout that there was no single, you'll write down, German or Italian speaking nation before 1871. That was on the list. Yeah, I didn't make the cut.
Just 2 words.
Yeah.
Name it like.
It didn't look good on shirts, They market tested it. Should we call our country the boot? And they just didn't test well. There was no single German or Italian speaking country before 1871. These are things that are brand new. In fact, it says on the handout, Italy, you'll write down, united in 1870. That's the first time we have a country called Italy, which means they're kind of late to the game. And because they're late to the game, you might remember when we talked about the scramble for Africa, they were kind of late in getting to Africa. And that's why when they looked at the map of Africa, they're like, oh, wow, there's this one part of Africa that's never been taken over. We're just going to zoom on over there and shouldn't be hard. But awkwardly for Italy, they actually got beat by this African country. What African country beat Italy and humiliated them? It was Ethiopia. So they were kind of late to the game. Why were they late to the game? Because they literally didn't exist until 1870. Germany. On the handout, Prussia, which is like a part of the world that doesn't, there's no country called Prussia anymore, but it was a thing. Prussia and the western part of the Austrian Empire were, you'll write down, German speaking. They were German speaking. And there was a move on your handout to unite all German-speaking peoples. They thought, it'd be really cool. Let's unite all German-speaking people. What would be cool is we should get all of us together that speak German and make one country. Obviously, that would be better than 4, 5, or 6 small German-speaking countries. Let's all get together. Now, even though they all want together, it's not like Germany is completely the same without any differences. It is got differences. In fact, there are religious differences. When we talk about Western Europe, there's 2 main choices religiously among Christianity. What are the 2 broad divisions in Western Christianity? No. In Western Europe, I have 2 choices. And there are no Orthodox people in Germany because it's called Eastern Orthodox. If you look at a map of Europe, Germany is part of what's called Western Europe. So there's two choices. What are the two choices of Christianity in Western Europe? What are they in Spain? What are they in Italy? They're a Catholic. And then the other choice, I could, if I'm not a Catholic, I am I'm a Protestant. Now listen, no, look, listen, you're okay, because there's a lot of different types of Protestants. If you are in England, you might be an Anglican, which is a type of Protestant. But what kind of Protestants are there in Germany? What are they called? They are Lutheran. Why are they called Lutheran? Because Luther started it, and FYI, what modern day country was Luther from? It was Germany, which is why you might remember way back when Luther's the first guy to translate the Bible into German. Man, look at you guys. It says on the handout, Prussian and Austria and southwestern Germany were Catholic. And northern Germany and Prussia were Lutheran. That's spelled Luther, A-N. Lutherans are a type of Protestants. Remember Protestants, if it's not in the Bible, they don't believe in it. They say they believe in sola scriptura. We just solely have scripture, sola scriptura. And they believe heaven is a free gift. You can say yes, you can say no, but it's free. We also want to write down about Prussia. It had one of the best armies in the world. That's a pretty big statement to make for a country that literally just came into existence. Because, like, we have not been like, okay, guess what? Today we're talking about Prussia. And you're like, oh, we just haven't stopped talking about Prussia. Well, Prussia, which becomes modern-day Germany, is a big deal. In fact, they have one of the best armies in the world. I should probably back up that statement, and I am, in just a bit. Prussia had one of the best armies in the world. It says on the handout there's a guy you should know, a guy named Otto von Bismarck. And he's like the main Prussian guy. And under him, Prussia grew to become, you'll write down, modern Germany. It's because of this guy. It's because of Otto von Bismarck that Prussia became modern Germany. So, again, looking at the map, everywhere on the map are parts of the world that speak what language? German. And the idea is all German-speaking people should probably be part of one country. We're going to call that Germany. But there's a little awkward detail about this map, and it's this little color right here, this little section, this light blue right here. This is a part of the world called Alsace-Lorraine. And they speak German there. But there's something awkward about Alsace-Lorraine. They're actually in France. Like, these are French citizens that don't speak French. They speak German. So next door is big Germany now, and they're looking at Alsace-Lorraine, and they're like, hey, you know what would be really cool? If we had that. Like, it would be awesome. Like, I speak German, they speak German, but the only problem is, like, it's part of France, and they call it France, like, hey, we kind of want Alsace-Lorraine, because you know what? They speak French, and also they have a lot of, like, coal there and stuff, so we can, like, make military stuff. So we want it. What's France going to say to this? No. I mean, it'd be like if Mexico asked the U.S., can we have all the parts of Texas that speak Spanish, like, in their homes? Like, that's a lot of parts of Texas. So we're going to, like, say no to that. And actually, France does, too. And so based on what you know about human history, what are these two countries going to do if they have a just...
Kill each other.
Oh, I thought they'd just, like, talk it out and, like, have
Kill each other.
a share session. No?
Cannons at people.
That's not human nature.
Drop people on cannons and blow them up.
So it says on the handout, there is something called the Franco-Prussian War, because there's France versus the Prussians. And we're going to write down that in this war, Germany invaded and quickly took Alsace and Lorraine. They invaded and quickly took Alsace and Lorraine. If we look at the handout, how many years did this war last? A couple? Which year? How many years? What does it say? So that's a couple years?
Maybe.
When it says 1871, that maybe means more than 1871?
No. I just don't want to say that.
So it was a year.
Okay.
It was a quick war. It was a quick war that Germany got in, and they got a lot of free stuff from it. They got Alsace and this kind of makes Germany feel, you know, war is not something to be afraid of. War is something that can happen quick. It's easy. You get free stuff. Actually, there was another country we studied recently that had a war that was like 3 months long. It was quick. It was easy, and they got a bunch of free stuff. What war was that? It was the Spanish-American War. We fought Spain for 3 months, and like more of our guys died from mosquito bites and like dirty water than Spanish bullets. This is actually bad because if you're thinking war is quick, war is easy, you're not going to think twice before jumping into war. And when we get to World War I on Friday, part of the problem is people jumped in thinking war is quick, war is easy. It's not a big deal. Turns out it's a big deal. That says on the handout, they took the German-speaking part of France. So Prussia's new, Germany's new, they're kind of thriving. Like, they just beat France. And bummer for France, this is like the first of many losses. France gets beat up in the Franco-Prussian War. They'll get beat up in World War I. They'll get beat up in World War II. They're going to get beat up in Vietnam. It's going to be a rough 100 years for France. On the handout, they need a motto. You know, like Germany does. You know, like at LaPorte High School, like on the announcements, they'll come on and they'll say, it's a great day to be a, or they'll say, make it a great day or not the. So these are like the things that you say, like it's supposed to represent LaPorte. Well, they also have the same desire. Like, you know what? We need a motto. Like, we're a new country. We're like kind of like the hot new thing. What's like a phrase that like, that's like the vibe we want to put out? What should we say? What's our motto? What's our theme? Got it. On quotation marks, on your handout, we're going to write down blood and iron. They're like, you know what? That's us. That's like what we're all about. Because like blood, like we're willing to fight. We're willing to put up. We're willing to take care of business. And iron, because in case you've missed it, the most important countries on planet Earth are those who've gone through an industrial revolution and have made iron into construction, iron into weapons, into all types of different things. Hey, and plus it looks really good on tattoos. Blood and iron. That's our motto. And this theme, blood and iron, is go for it. It was the foundation of the new German Empire. Okay, so
It's a Buddhist symbol.
not a Buddhist symbol.
What is it?
So in Jainism. So, but yeah, we don't want to like get tattoos of swastikas. So I just want to put that out for anyone listening that we're gonna say tattoos of swastikas. We're on the list of like there's good ideas and bad ideas. Good ideas: vaccinating against polio, ending child hunger, fighting for equal rights. On the bad column, we're gonna put getting a tattoo of a swastika. So no, we're not going to imagine that. We're going to actually keep moving forward. And it says on the handout that this is the foundation of the new German Empire. Now, briefly though, speaking about Adolf Hitler is only possible because of 1871. If you don't have the idea that Germany's flexing its muscles, if you don't have the idea that blood and iron is Germany, if you don't have this idea, then you don't have a Hitler. Hitler begins right now, 1871. Moving away from Germany, let's talk about another fan favorite. So it turns out Japan has a pyramid of power. Everyone has a pyramid of power. Yesterday we saw a pyramid of power in Latin America. We saw in Latin America the top of their pyramid of power were white people born in Spain. In the pyramid of power yesterday, we saw there's a group of people. We saw there's people called the Creoles. These are white people born in America. In the pyramid of power of Latin America, we saw there was mestizos, there was mulattoes, and so sad, the bottom of the pyramid of power in Latin America were black people, right? So that's sad. Now, there's also a pyramid of power in Japan, and according to this pyramid of power on the slide, on the handout, who's on the top? Now, the emperor's on the top, but there's a problem with the emperor. The problem with the emperor is what, according to the slide? He had real little power. Like, he's emperor in name, and people respect him, but he can't really do anything. Actually, who does that remind you of today in 2021 who's like in charge of a country by name but doesn't really do anything? No, Joe Biden actually is pretty powerful. He's president of the United States. He's a,
Try again.
yeah, try again.
Let's see. Oh, we could.
Someone with a crown in 2021.
Queen Elizabeth.
Queen Elizabeth II. Hey, she's still alive. I think she just had a birthday. I think she just turned 94 or something. I forget how old she is, but she just had a birthday. Her husband died at age 99, like 2 weeks ago. But Queen Elizabeth, listen, she's the Queen of England. She's the Queen of Canada. She's the Queen of Jamaica. She's the Queen of Australia, New Zealand. She's the Queen of all those places, but she doesn't really have any power. She's like a symbol. And in the same way, in Japan, the emperor doesn't really have a lot of power. It says on this picture, the person with the real power was the shogun. Now, the shogun's like a military leader. He's the actual guy who does the day-to-day. Now, that's cool and all, but I don't know if you remember, but Japan's a series of islands, right? And I can't be everywhere at once, so I need to delegate some of this responsibility. And there's another group of people called daimyos. And daimyos are wealthy landowners. These are like local lords. These are local lords. And that was rough. That was rough. There's local lords. These daimyos. And guess what? They're kind of like governors. They're like governors, these daimyos. So you have the emperor who can't do anything. You have the shogun in charge. You have these landlords called daimyos. But I'm a lord, but I can't be like stopping every crime in Japan. So I need local guys with swords. And what are those local guys with swords that are going to take care of crime and keep order? The samurai, right? And then below the samurai, you have the peasants. Not a surprise there. We see peasants on the bottom of society. Oh, wait.
Actually, there's somebody.
Weird.
The merchants.
Whoa, wait a second.
They're trash.
Merchants, these are business people. And in fact,
They're rich.
they are rich. Japan is kind of a weird place.
Wait, but aren't they like that other countries that do that?
I'm watching
Mm-mm. Japan's kind of a weird place because they put merchants on the bottom, even though these people are actually kind of rich. And it tells you why. It tells you on the slide, merchants were the lowest class because why?
They produce nothing on their own.
Like, they don't make anything. Think about like some of the richest people on planet Earth today. Think about Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is the owner of Amazon. What does Jeff Bezos physically make in a day? Like, what does he make to sell?
Nothing.
Nothing. He doesn't make anything, right? Think about Mark Zuckerberg. He's the owner, founder of Facebook. What does he physically make every day?
Awkward.
Nothing.
interactions.
Think about Jeff
Elon Musk.
Jeff Dorsey.
Who's that?
I'm pretty sure he's
I have no
the
idea.
guy who owns Twitter. You might want to think about knowing who one of the most powerful men on the planet is.
Who's that owns Facebook?
That's Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Yeah, he listens to press like all the time.
Karen, you can't be talking right now. You're in timeout.
So,
What did I say? Oh, was it because I said I'd get a swastika tattoo?
okay.
Not you.
Okay.
So listen, all these people that we mentioned, they don't make anything. And in Japanese culture, if you don't make something, there's like little respect. Now, ironically, in capitalism, where are merchants going to be? They're going to be near the top, right? So this is the system that Japan has. at this time. It says on the handout, originally the Emperor of Japan was revered, but had no real power. He had no real power. He's the emperor, but he has no real power. Write down no real power. Where it says revered, but had no, you'll write down real power. Oh. Second line on the handout. It says, during the Tokugawa shogunate, the shogun had real power. The shogun was the actual guy in charge. I think it's the same word for both lines. I don't know why you're crossing it out. The emperor had no real power. They don't have it like this exactly to this day. Third line, we have a group of people, vocabulary word called daimyos. A daimyo, you'll write down as a local lord. Because it turns out the shogun can't be everywhere. Turns out Japan's a series of islands. Turns out some of these islands have mountainous regions that divide one area from the next. I need a guy in charge in every part of Japan. We call these people daimyos. It says that they also had little interference from the shogun. There's a problem though. Here's Japan. Japan is actually huge. It's like the size of California, which is one of the largest states in the United States. Another problem with Japan is that it's a lot of islands. Another problem with Japan is it's got mountains. It's divided. So Japan is really big. It's broken up, and there's like a local guy in charge of every area. That's a problem. It says on the handout, please listen, Japan was decentralized and could not easily coordinate, you'll write down, resistance to outside threats. They could not coordinate resistance to outside threats. Now, that's a big deal because let me point out, there is a huge outside threat to Asia. There's a group of people who are not Asian, but they've come to Asia for trade. They've come to Asia ready to fight, and they are a threat in the 1500s, the 1600s, the 1700s, and especially the 1800s. Who is a threat that you need to watch out for? Broader than Britain. Europeans in general, right? Europeans in general are a threat. And they are not prepared to deal with that. Because just to kind of rehearse what Europeans have done, who has conquered and taken over India directly? The British. Who have humiliated China and forced them to take opium? The British. It turns out that Europeans are thriving in East Asia. In fact, what is one of the wealthiest corporations on the planet run by the Dutch? VOC, the Dutch East India Company. That's right, absolutely right. So, super proud, man, super proud. It says on the handout they were not prepared to resist outside threats. It says on the handout that the shogun tried to actually limit exposure to foreigners, especially Europeans. Man, we got to watch out for Europeans. They're bad. Especially Europeans. You might remember in class we watched some video clips. There's a movie called Silence with Andrew Garfield. And it turns out that when white Europeans show up, some of the first people are Jesuits. And they bring Christianity. And actually, it was poor Japanese people. Up to 100,000 poor Japanese people sign up to become Christian. Freaks out the Japanese government. What do to these Japanese Christians? They crucify them. They torture them, right? That was the strategy. The strategy was keep white European influence out. I don't know if we can trust it. And I get that. That's a reasonable fear. It says on the handout, there is something that happens that's unexpected though. Japan is expecting white Europeans to show up. But they're expecting the British. They're expecting the Dutch. those are the countries you know about. And actually, they're expecting them to come from this part of the map. Like, they're expecting the British are going to sail up. They're going to expect the Dutch are going to sail up. Heck, even the Portuguese might come. But the thing that takes Japan by surprise, there's a group of white people that don't sail from the west. They actually show up from the east. And they actually have a picture documenting the day these white people show up. And I want to show you something. They have a picture of all these white ships that come in. But also, they have a picture of their flag. Now, it's not a perfect rendering, but whose flag is that? It's got stripes. It's got a star. Well, sure, it's not perfect. It's not perfect, but listen. It's not perfect, but listen. The Japanese were not ready or expecting the Americans. But we show up anyway. It says on the, and that shouldn't be a surprise, because think about what America's been doing. America's been building empire. You might remember, we fought wars with Native Americans, took their land. You might remember, we fought a war with Mexico, took a third of Mexico for ourselves, thank you very much. Also, our record has included things like taking over Hawaii, fighting a war with Spain. We are building our own empire, so it shouldn't be totally shocking that we look to Asia. In fact, that's why we wanted Hawaii in the first place, to get to Asia. It says on the handout that American naval forces, on the next line, it says on the handout, American naval forces, there's a nickname for them, they're called the Black Ships. Just because it sounds cool. They're like, what should we call ourselves?
Do they have black flags?
American naval forces, the Black Ships, under Commodore Perry, demanded that Japan, you'll write down, open its ports to the U.S. We want to trade. We want to do business with Japan. Japan has been all about no. Japan has been like, we're on our own. Japan's been, we're doing our own thing. And we show up with guns and with cannons and with ships and we say, time to open up. Now, I got two choices. I could say yes, and I look like a punk. I've been pushed around by these groups of people that just showed up yesterday. Or I could say no. There's a problem with saying no, though. The problem of saying no is, what happened to another Asian country that said no to white Europeans?
They got pooped on there nowadays.
You might remember China was in a situation where Europe wanted to sell China opium. And China said, this is terrible for our society, no. And that led to a series of wars called because it was about opium, the Opium Wars, and the British humiliated China. So Japan is looking at this situation and saying, I don't want what happened to China to happen to me. Let's tell the Americans, yes. It says on the handout, they didn't want to repeat China's humiliation in the Opium Wars. They didn't want to repeat their humiliation in the Opium Wars.
Wait, so like everybody knew about like the wars and stuff?
Oh, I mean, well, Japan's right next door to China. It's like everyone knows everyone's biz, you know? Like, they're in the same neighborhood, right?
They're only like 20, 30 miles east.
Wait, so like was there like a newspaper?
Well, there were newspapers, but also Japan and China have like relationships. They have ambassadors and representatives, and they trade. And so, word spreads. It says on the handout, on the back side, that Japanese leaders grew discontent. I put disconnect because I'm dumb. But it should say they grew discontent at the shogun's inability to defend Japan. You'll write down, to defend Japan. What I mean by this is that when the shogun gives in to the U.S., some people in Japan say, that was a stupid move. When the shogun says yes to America, some people in Japan say, why did you say yes to the Americans? Like, I know you don't want to be like China, but you know who beat China? The British. And aren't the British and the Americans like on the exact same level? Like the British own a fourth of planet Earth. Okay, I get it. You should have some concerns about the British. But what do the Americans own? Oh, Nevada? You know, like you took over Colorado? You know, like
Washington.
what?
We have Washington, Oregon.
Okay, yeah, Washington, Oregon. So so really they're like, I don't know if we should have given in right away. People get upset, and you know what happens to the Tokugawa government that gave up? They're going to get kicked out. Their own people say, yeah, we're done with you. We enter a brand new phase in Japanese history called the Meiji Restoration. It says on the handout, during the Meiji Restoration, the Tokugawa were overthrown, and Japan entered a period. Now listen, I don't want to get beaten up by white people. If I don't want to be conquered by Europeans, what do I need to do to my economy and my culture?
Become white.
There's a word for this.
Westernization.
Yes, we're going to write down, they entered a period of modernization. I will always remember this. Meiji begins with the letter M. Modernization begins with the letter M. What's the most important thing about the Meiji period of Japan? They started to modernize. If I want to modernize, this has all kinds of levels. One level of modernizing, how should I start dressing? Who should I start copying if I want to be? Sure should. No. West does not mean cowboys. It means Europe is what it means. Take a look at this picture. These are Japanese officials. If you look at these Japanese officials, they got the gold shoulder things. Remember we talked about this? We looked at a picture yesterday of a Mexican leader named Porfirio Diaz, and he had the fancy hat. He had the little shoulder. These Japanese officials are dressing like white Europeans. Because it turns out, who is the culture dominating and conquering and control? The West. You do like the people who are winning. Look at this other picture.
So basically, just like the West, like the popular kids, and everybody wants to be like.
Right, exactly. And then there's like the kids wearing Crocs, which is like the Spain and Portugal. Like you're like,
That's me. I wear Crocs all the time.
you're like, really Spain and Portugal?
Don't you Crocs look on? We already had this conversation.
Bro, they're literally just
Alright.
You could say the British are like Converse. The Germans are like Vans, and Spain and Portugal are like the Crocs. I'm not a Nike person, so I don't like that.
Converse are
Who wears
Nike.
those?
It says on the handout, rather on the slide. Take a look. Take a look. These are Japanese officials. They're dressed like, they're not wearing robes anymore. Listen, they're not wearing robes anymore. They're like dressing. They're dressing like Europeans. Take a look at the women. These Japanese women are not dressing like in traditional Japanese garb. They're wearing the same types of European dresses. I would not be surprised if under those dresses they're wearing something to make themselves look a lot corsets, right? They've got the little what are those things called? These little the white things are going to a sash. They got sashes, you know.
You're so educated, you can say it's like-
Yeah, no. I didn't say I'm so educated. They have the sash, right? They are dressing like white Europeans. It says on the with the word sash. Like I need to incorporate more sashes in my day-to-day outfits. It says on the handout, all helpful foreign ideas were embraced. All helpful foreign ideas were embraced. This is a change.
Loving the print lady.
This is a change. They had rejected. They were crucifying Christians. Now they're like, you know what? If it's helpful, sign me up. And if that sash is helpful, hey, let's order some more sashes.
No one wants to waste over.
On the handout, they based their navy. You'll write down on Britain because like Great Britain had like the best navy in the world. We're gonna write down. They based their navy on Britain because they had like the best navy in the world. And who has like a really good army even though they're like a new country? No. No. I'm not gonna copy Ethiopia. They literally beat up France in a year. Germany. Their army, they based after Germany.
Did they get swastika tattoos?
No.
Cameron.
You're gonna write down on the next line. Also, hundreds of students were sent to Europe to study. Listen, I want to build roads and bridges. I want all that stuff. But you know what I don't want? I don't want to have to call up Europe every 5 minutes when I need something. You might remember yesterday in Latin America, there was a country that wanted trains, they wanted rail, but they didn't have the people that knew how to build those, so they had to bring British people into the Spanish-speaking country. So many British people were in the Spanish-speaking country. The official language of the train line in this country was English. What Latin American country was that? Oh, no.
Colombia.
Is it in Central America?
It's in South America.
Oh, bye. I don't know.
Colombia.
No.
No, Colombia's in Central America.
It was,
Brazil.
no, Colombia's in South America.
What's the question?
Oh,
It
the
is,
white people.
it's Argentina. It's Argentina. Now listen, listen. The British never take over Argentina. But if you're in debt to them, if you depend on them for everything, that is a way of economically controlling them. They don't want that. They say, you know what? I don't want to have to call up Europe every 5 minutes. Instead, let's do this. Let's send our best to Europe and study, and we'll build our own bridges, our own highways, our own rail lines. We'll do it on our own. It says on the handout, engineering schools were set up. They are not going to be like Latin America and pushed around by white Europeans. In fact, they want to learn from white Europeans. And if white Europeans have empire, Japan says, you know what, I think it'd be cool if we had an empire. We're going to learn from the best and do what they do. And you know what? There's an island called Hawaii and a place called Pearl Harbor. It looks kind of good. We need to put that on the list. And they will. World War II begins with the Meiji Restoration. Modernization means empire. Japan says, hey, sign me up for empire. I can do it too. Below that, last section, nationalism and social Darwinism. Going back to Russia real quick. Russia's got a problem. Russia's problem is, as I mentioned, there's a lot of different ethnic groups. And I'm concerned that if people get proud of their ethnic identity, Russia might break up. So what can I do to like bring us all together so that when we look at the Russian flag, we say, that's my flag, that's me, that's our new culture? No, there's a different solution.
Religion.
It says Russia, seeking to prevent rebellion, tried to, and this is a weird, funny word, they wanted to Russify its people. Like if I say you need to become Americanized, it's like become part of American culture. I want to Russify my people. You'll write down by forcing Russian on various groups. So we're going to make all of our schools speak Russian, and that's how you're going to become more American, more Russian. Cyrillic.
Are they the only country that uses it?
I think they might use it like in Armenia also,
Like, it just looks like.
and Georgia
It
maybe.
looks violent.
It sounds like
No, I think it's German. I don't think Russian sound. I think German sounds
You don't
violent.
think Russian sounds
I
weird?
don't. I mean, it's not doesn't sound like English. If weird means
Yeah.
doesn't sound
No,
like
I'm
it.
just saying, like,
I don't get that vibe.
German is more harsh than Russian, but they're both harsh languages.
they both.
I think we can agree with that.
German does sound harsh. Like I feel when I hear German, like
have
I
ever seen German
feel
verses?
I feel like when you hear German, like it doesn't seem like a love language. Like they say, oh, French is like a love language. You know, you hear that, or like the romantic language. I feel like in German, like the closest way to say I love you is I will not conquer you. You know, like I feel like that's like the equivalent. You know, like oh, that's so sweet. You know, you're not gonna invade me. It's like that's like their little way of saying I respect you. You know. On the handout, there's another country that has problems. And what country is this?
Pain with the-
This country is Spain. Now, let me tell you about the problem with Spain is that you think that Spain speaks Spanish, period. But they don't. There's actually 5 different languages spoken in Spain today. They speak Catalan, Basque, Asturian, and Galician. Now listen, if you and I go today, one of the most important cities in all Spain is Barcelona, and if you ask them, hey, are you Spanish? People say, no, I'm Catalonian. I'm from Catalan. They have their own language they don't want to speak Spanish. In Barcelona, they speak Catalan. In the north, the people there, hey, are you Spanish? No, I'm Basque. There's a problem in Spain. That's a Basque. But there's a people group called Basque. And guess what? All these parts of Spain today in 2021, they don't want to be part of Spain. They all want to be independent countries. From the Spanish perspective, that's bad. Because I can't have parts of my country, I can't have one of the biggest cities in Spain leave. So how can I make them be more Spanish? Well, I'm going to make them speak Spanish. They have an official language. And so what we're going to write down on the handout, in Spain, Basque and Catalan speakers were oppressed. They told them, you cannot speak your language in schools. They told them, we are speaking only Spanish. It hasn't helped because to this day, Catalan wants to be its own nation. They want to break off because they don't speak Spanish there. In 2020. I'll show you when we get back from lunch how it sounds. So Catalan sounds like Spanish. You could probably understand it. Basque sounds like no language on planet Earth. Actually, people who study language are called linguists. They cannot connect Basque to any other language. They have no idea where Basque came from. It's obvious if you listen to Italian and Spanish, they're related. You can tell. Italian and Spanish related. They're similar. Basque sounds like alien language like no one has ever. I'll play it for you when we get back. No one knows. No, it's a mystery today. They still speak it to this day. You can taste Basque in college in the United States. You could study that language. It says on the handout, immigrants to the U.S. were expected to speak what language? English, which is like when my parents went to school. My parents went to school in the 60s on the border, and they were punished for speaking Spanish. So my parents were physically disciplined for speaking Spanish in school. They wanted them to speak English, which is one of the reasons when we get to third generation Mexican Americans, like me, my Spanish speaking skills not as great because my parents were beaten for speaking Spanish in schools. So I can understand, I would say 35 to 55% I can understand 55% of Spanish, but my speaking is like 20%, like on a good day, 25, That's right.
Yo soy Lacone.
Joe? Yo.
On the handout, another theme we see is Western powers, that's like Europe and like America, were globally dominating, you'll write down, non-European people. Non-European people. So how can we account for that? How can we account for why is it that white nations are like beating up the Chinas, the Indias, the Africas, the Australias, the New Zealands, the brown-skinned Mizzou? Like, what's up with that? Well, this guy on the screen has a partial answer. Who is this guy? One of the most important men who've ever lived. And got a great beard. Not Santa Claus. This is none other than Charles Origin of Species Darwin. You should know him from what class? Biology. He came up with a little theory called the theory of evolution. But he did so much more than just the theory of evolution. He also wrote another bestseller called The Descent of Man. And here's a quotation from Darwin. This is a quote that might put Darwin with Dr. Seuss on the you just got canceled list. Listen to what Charles Darwin says about race. He writes, and we'll fill out, the Western nations of Europe, in other words, white people, are so immeasurably surpass their former savage progenitors that they stand at the summit of civilization. White people are on the top of all civilization. The civilized races, which is another word for saying white people, will almost certainly, exterminate, awkward, exterminate and replace the savage races through the world. His Twitter account just got banned, right? Just with that line. He says that civilized people, in other words, white people, will exterminate and replace the savage races of the world. It says on the handout, he believes, and others did, that survival of the fittest applied to some societies, as some societies were inferior. Some societies were inferior. There's a word for this. It's called, on your handout, white man's burden. Let me give you an example and show you a picture of white man's burden. Now, this is a racist picture. This has a white man carrying something on his shoulders. This something, sadly, is an African man. He is depicted on purpose to look ape-like. He looks confused. He looks powerless. But this white man is carrying this African. What is he carrying him to? What does it say? A schoolhouse. Listen, the argument is white people get to Africa and Africans are selling each other. Africans are eating each other. Africans are practicing witchcraft. White people get to India. What are they doing to widows? Oh, they're burning them alive. They get to China. What are they doing? Forcing them to bind their feet. This idea of white man's burden, we're going to write down, it was the responsibility of white nations to, please write down, conquer and civilize non-Western nations. It was the responsibility of white people. It's my burden. It's what I have to do. We have to conquer and civilize non-Western nations. I'll give you an example. If you are a mom and you're dropping off your kid at kindergarten and you walk in, there's no teacher, there's no adult, there's kids eating glue, kids throwing safety scissors, kids on top of desks, you're not going to leave the room and say, all right, good luck, mija, see you later. You're going to I'm the adult, I need to take charge. That's how white Europeans saw the world. They said, we are civilized, we show up to India, they're burning women, I think we need to take over and we need to take control.
Same for me.
I don't need this theory.
Sir, if you were only alive today,